Hey everyone, welcome to the Customer Support Client Success Executive Brain Trust. We did something really fun today. The topic of our discussion was people planning and workforce planning. We had a great presentation by Ben Rosenberg, who I'm going to invite up on here to kind of summarize what we chatted about today. But then we also asked the group to put together their best thinking and come up with the top 3 best practices as it relates to people planning in client success customer support, which we're going to show you here in just a moment. So I'm actually going to turn the time over to Ben to kind of summarize what we went over today and some of the results and some of the best practices that we discovered. So Ben, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. To quickly summarize, we spent a lot of time today talking about kind of how to plan for each phase of your team's growth. And at the core level, really the couple things that you should be doing at every phase are plan ahead. So if you can start to understand the roles, the responsibilities, maybe some of the metrics and the KPIs that go along with each of those, as your team starts to grow and evolve, having that as a little bit of a roadmap can help you plan more effectively. We talked a lot about some of the tools to do that. And then we also spent some time talking about sort of the types of things that you may need at each stage. So kind of early on, a little bit more fundamental, how do we tactically get the work done? And kind of that middle stage is a little bit more about how do we automate, how do we track and measure a little bit more effectively? And then in that last stage, it's really all about scale. So how do we deflect cases from coming in? How do we service customers more effectively? And then, lastly, how do we enable the team more effectively to be able to handle the work that's coming their way, whether that be on the support or the success side. So we had a lot of really good conversation as well as in the breakout room. We came up with, as a group, a handful of kind of best practices that sort of touch on some of these areas. So Paul, I don't know if you want to kind of pull some of those up and we can dive a little more in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben, for that summary. You can see there's a lot into people planning. And so I'm going to share my screen and show you folks out there basically what we came up with. But what we asked everyone was, what are some of the best practices you have learned? A lot of it is what Ben mentioned, and there's some tactical information in here as well as general. So we asked everyone, you can see behind here, we asked everyone to submit sticky notes. We got a lot of activity, a lot of ideas, and then we went through and asked everyone to vote on which one is going to have the biggest impact for the most minimal effort. So if you're out there in customer support, client success, these are some of the things that you can do up on the screen in terms of people planning that are going to have the biggest impact. So the first one was creating a culture of mentorship. Does anyone out there on our panel right now want to chat about that result and why that result to you as an executive is so important?
I can kick us off. It'll make your life a lot easier, right? So if you have folks like that who can take on some of that mentorship role, it can help reduce the burden of the leadership team more broadly. More subjectively, I think it really just helps establish like a great culture and environment to work in, right? Like I learn new things every day, as all of us hopefully do as well. And being able to build that from the start is a really effective way to sometimes do a little bit more with less.
Yeah, I think it also gives you a pulse, on the workload. It gives you a pulse on a lot of different things, making sure that you're in touch with your team. One of the questions that came up earlier was actually caseload size, and caseload size is so variable. And so it's really important to develop that culture of mentorship so that you can get a pulse on what's going on inside your organization and the tickets that are coming in as well. All right, so the second thing was the unique votes up here. Let me share my screen. We had a submission here in green, is consider segmentation of your customer base and how their behaviors impact the customer support team. So Colin, I'd love for you to chat about that since that was your sticky note. Tell us a little bit about how you're currently segmenting, how people go about segmenting, and how you assign that based off of behaviors impact.
Yeah, businesses have different kinds of customers, different product offerings. They're going to be segmenting their customers in different ways. But I think when it comes to customer support and experience, you really want to understand the best way to segment your customers based on the differences in impact between segments that those customers would have, those customer groups would have on your support team. So for example, you could have a segment where their cases per user is, 20% of customers in those segment are going to reach out to support on a monthly basis. You might have another segment where 5% of those customers are going to touch support. And then if you can understand where your business is going when it comes to growing those segments, it can really help you with planning your support growth strategically. So if it's a segment that doesn't contact support as often, you're going to make a different decision than if it's a segment that does. And it can also lend itself towards complexities between segments. So one segment may have much more complex support cases or support issues than others. You wouldn't be as considerate of AI self-service tools for that segment when you're planning your workforce. It would be more that you would want a human touch for that segment. So really, really useful exercise to brainstorm with your team on how you would want to segment your customers, get that data, and then go to the business, understand where they're going when it comes to those kinds of customers and plan accordingly.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much for that, Colin. I love that. All right, so we did actually have a three-way tie for third place in terms of what are some best practices. And if I could summarize all of these, I think in Ben's presentation, he said something really important that kind of summarizes this is make sure that you are leaving time for learning and development of your team. You have to plan that in as it relates to people planning. But we've got this five-way tie between, coaching the individual towards their strong suits, 12 to 18 months program to upskill employee and focused on individual growth, hiring and onboarding, CSM onboarding, crisp 30, 60, 90-day plan. Always have a backup plan with existing staff and use metrics to develop resource planning model. Based off of those things, does anyone else have anything else that they've seen? We've got this great group here of executives. Anything else you want to add to maybe those 5 things?
I could go just real quick. I think all of these kind of tie into a similar message, and that's the communication factor. So I think in order to be able to kind of successfully build a structure, like a 12 to 18 month program or your 30, 60, 90-day plans for your crew, you really need to be communicating with other departments, make sure that your planning aligns with the business plans, so that you make sure that your team is adding the most value that they can to the company. And so before you spend a lot of time really developing, your resource planning models and coaching and setting the roadmap, what you should do is really just make sure that your vision and KPIs that you think are important are the same that marketing thinks, and that the CFO thinks, and things like that, because it's really going to help add value to the data that your team is going to be collecting, and it's really going to make things a lot easier when you're trying to explain certain things down the line, as far as staffing, like, hey, we need more people, look at this great data we gave you, kind of thing. So when you think about scalability, it's going to help those conversations as well. So that's just kind of a over under on what I think about those couple, all great ideas and resources.
Excellent, Lizzie. I loved that. Thank you so much. Anyone else want to finalize? Just last comment here on any of these items?
The only other thing I would throw in on the sort of learning and development and onboarding is don't forget about the soft skills, right? I think a lot of times we assume people come into these roles with some of those soft skills already, but setting aside some dedicated time and energy towards some of those competencies that are important for you, I think is really helpful as well.
Yes, thank you so much for adding that, Ben. This has been a great panel. Overall, a lot of great best practices have been shared. I want to thank you all very much for your contributions. And I hope to see you at a future Client Success Customer Support Executive Brain Trust. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks so much for coming, everybody.
Thank you.